20 years. For 2 solid decades, I poured my heart, my soul, and every bit of my energy into Arthur Vance. I'm Mabel Harrison, by the way. I helped that man grow his dream from a single, struggling motel into 7 boutique hotels. And then, at 58 years old, he discarded me like an old, frayed towel. But what I discovered in a dusty, forgotten passbook from my girlhood didn't just suddenly fix my financial crisis. It uncovered a secret my parents had kept for 4 decades, one they'd taken with them when they passed. Up until about 3 months ago, I was the director of operations for the Vance Hospitality Group, a chain of hotels across New England that I helped nurture from one single property into a 7-hotel portfolio. I knew every linen supplier, every housekeeping standard, every leaky faucet we had to get fixed in the middle of the night. I personally trained every single front desk manager, I handled every guest catastrophe, and when Arthur Vance's own nephew was caught skimming from the till, I was the one who managed it discreetly to spare Arthur the shame. Now, I'm not sharing this with you because I'm looking for sympathy. Goodness, no. I'm telling you because, sometimes, life knocks the wind right out of you, so hard you're sure you'll never stand again. And then, you find out that your parents somehow anticipated it 4 decades earlier and had woven a safety net you never even knew was there. This story is about so much more than dollars and cents. It's about how 2 simple, hardworking people, a shipyard welder and a seamstress, understood the true meaning of value in a way that a millionaire hotel magnate never, ever could. My father, Robert, passed on in 2010. He spent 43 years at the shipyard in Quincy. He never took a sick day he didn't earn and never uttered a word of complaint. My mother, Alice, left us 5 years after that. She was a seamstress for a local coat factory, her fingers still quick and sure on the machine, even at 70. They lived their whole lives in the same little 3-bedroom cape they purchased back in 1978. They always drove second-hand cars. My dad cut his own grass until his body just wouldn't let him anymore. And it seems that all that time they were saving sandwich bags and comparing grocery flyers. They were also pulling off the most incredible financial illusion I could ever imagine. But goodness, I'm jumping ahead. First, let me explain what it feels like to dedicate your entire professional life to building someone else's vision, just to be informed one day that you're too old to be of any use. Let me tell you about that dreadful morning I entered a bank carrying nothing but sheer panic, and how I walked out with a completely new understanding of my past. And most importantly, let me tell you how my parents, who never kept more than $5,000 in their checking account at any one time, somehow knew something about Warren Buffett that would one day save their daughter from absolute ruin. This isn't just my story, you see. It's the story of every single person who's ever been dismissed as past their prime. It's for anyone who has ever looked around and wondered if loyalty counts for anything at all these days. And it is absolutely for anyone who ever misjudged their parents' quiet wisdom just because it came from a life of hard work and not from an Ivy League education. So, allow me to bring you back 3 months, to that dark, wood-paneled office where Arthur Vance, the man who used to call me his work daughter, explained to me why 58 years old was, apparently, the expiration date for my competence. His real son, Kyle, sat right next to him. 28 years old, with smooth hands that had never so much as plunged a toilet or wrestled a broken luggage cart at midnight. He was telling me all about new directions and fresh perspectives, while I just stared at the photograph on Arthur's desk. It was from our very first hotel opening, where I was standing right beside him. We were both covered in drywall dust, just laughing our heads off because we had just survived a surprise blizzard check-in with only half the heat working. That picture was about to become Exhibit A in the argument for why some investments need more time to mature than others, and why my parents, God rest their souls, were apparently financial wizards disguised as simple, working-class folks who saved twist ties and reused tea bags. I began working for Arthur Vance when I was 38. Back then, he just had one small motel called the Harbor Light, right on the edge of town. It had maybe 20 rooms, and the lobby was so tiny you couldn't fit more than 2 people at the counter. But Arthur had something special. He had his grandfather's eye for hospitality, and he possessed a dream that was far grander than that tiny registration desk could ever contain. I met him through my cousin Tommy, who delivered linens to hotels. "This Vance fellow needs help," Tommy told me one Sunday at my mother's table. His books are a catastrophe. His reservation system is a mess. But Mabel, the man knows hospitality, and he's got a fire in his belly. I was working as an assistant manager at a department store at the time, earning an okay paycheck, but I wasn't advancing. My husband, Frank, and I had just had our son, Daniel, and I knew I needed something more substantial. The first time I walked into the Harbor Light, Arthur was yelling at a plumbing supplier on the phone. He pointed a leaky ballpoint pen at me and said, "You the numbers gal Tommy sent? Can you start right now? And the new sign delivery guy wants a check, but I have no idea if I have enough in the account to cover it." That was Arthur, through and through. Pure chaos and passion all mixed together. I found his tax documents buried under a pile of guest registration cards. His bank account had plenty of funds, he just hadn't bothered to log any of his deposits for the last 3 months. By the end of that very first day, I had organized his catastrophe of a back office, haggled for a better price with the sign man, and ended up helping clean rooms when his only housekeeper called in sick. "You're staying," Arthur declared at the end of the day, handing me a $50 bill from his pocket. "I'm making you my operations manager." "What's an operations manager?" I asked. "I have no idea," he said. "But you'll manage everything that isn't me." Deal. My husband, Frank, understood why I accepted. "He believes in you, Mabel," he said that night, rocking little Daniel. "And you believe in him. That's a rare thing." For 2 decades, that mutual belief was the engine for everything I did. When Arthur wanted to open a second hotel, I found the property, I negotiated the loan, and I oversaw the entire renovation while still running the original. I trained every front desk clerk to remember that Mr. Henderson liked a corner room on the top floor, that Mrs. Petrov was allergic to down pillows, and that the Johnson family celebrated their anniversary every March 15th and always wanted a bottle of chilled cider waiting for them. My son, Daniel, grew up doing his homework in the lobby. My daughter, Sarah, learned to count by helping me inventory the little soap bars. Frank would bring the children by on Friday nights, and Arthur would come out of his office and boom, "These are my bonus grandchildren. Daniel, you're getting tall. Sarah, beautiful just like your mother." The business grew, year after year. The third hotel opened when I was 45. The fourth and fifth came in a pair when I was 50. Every single time, I was there from the first blueprint to the grand opening. I knew which construction crews were reliable, which bedding would last, which neighborhoods would welcome a new hotel. I wrote the training manuals, I developed the inventory systems, I implemented the reservation software that kept all of it running smoothly. But more than managing systems, I managed the human crises. When Arthur's nephew, Ben, started padding the expense reports at Hotel Number 3, I caught it, and I handled it quietly. When the head of housekeeping at Hotel Number 5 had a breakdown and walked out, I stepped in myself and cleaned toilets for 3 days straight until we found a replacement. When Arthur's brother-in-law tried to sue him, I was the one mediating family feuds at 2 a.m. in Arthur's living room. "Mabel, you're not just my manager," Arthur would say during our late-night planning sessions. "You're family. This legacy we're building, it's for all of us. My children, your children. We're creating something that lasts." And I believed him. Lord help me, I believed every single word. When my father, Robert, passed away, Arthur came to the funeral, stood beside me at the grave, and said, "Robert raised a good daughter. He'd be proud of what you've built." When my mother, Alice, got sick 5 years later, he sent flowers to the hospice. "Family takes care of family," he'd said. By my 58th birthday, we had 7 hotels employing over 200 people. I knew all their names, their children's names, their stories. I truly thought I was building something permanent, something that mattered. I believed that loyalty and hard work would equal security. I was so wrong about Arthur. But as it turned out, I was just as wrong about my parents, who were playing a much longer game than any of us knew. 3 weeks after my 58th birthday, my entire world fell apart. It was a Tuesday morning in March, unusually cold, and I got to the main office at 7:30, just like always. I was looking over the previous night's occupancy reports when Arthur's secretary called. "Mr. Vance wants to see you in his office," she said. "Kyle will be joining you." Kyle. Arthur's youngest, fresh from some fancy business school. He always wore expensive suits and clicked away on his tablet, making notes while the rest of us actually worked. He'd never checked in a guest or carried a bag in his life, but he had opinions on everything. I walked into Arthur's office. He sat behind that enormous mahogany desk, the one I'd helped him find at an antique auction. Kyle was lounging in the leather chair beside him, scrolling on his phone. The walls were just covered in photos from all our hotel openings over the years. And in every last one of them, I was standing right there next to Arthur. "Mabel, my friend," Arthur started, and I knew right away from that tone, that apologetic tone for something that hadn't even happened yet, that something was terribly wrong. "Please, have a seat." I sat. Kyle put his phone away and opened a leather-bound portfolio, pulling out papers full of colorful charts. "Miss Harrison," he started right in, not even letting his father speak, "I've been conducting a comprehensive analysis of our operational overhead. We need to discuss restructuring." "Restructuring?" I looked at Arthur, but he was just studying his fingernails. "Arthur, just last month you said bookings were up 30%. We're about to break ground on number 8 in Westlake." "The hospitality model needs updating," Kyle interrupted, his voice flat. "We're implementing dynamic pricing algorithms, social media marketing, influencer stays. The industry has evolved past traditional management structures." "I can learn new systems," I said, my mouth suddenly dry. "Arthur, you know I can adapt. Remember when we moved to that new digital reservation platform? I mastered it in a week." Arthur finally looked up at me, and his eyes were just cold. Empty of that warmth I'd known for 2 decades. "Mabel, you're too old for this business now. These young people, they speak another language. It's all Instagram this and TikTok that. Kyle understands that world." "Too old." The words felt like a slap. "I'm 58, Arthur, not 80. I work 70 hours a week. When the main boiler failed at Hotel Number 2 last month, who was there at midnight getting it fixed?" "That's precisely the point," Kyle chimed in. "We don't need someone fixing boilers anymore. We need someone who understands data analytics, occupancy rates, and digital engagement." I got to my feet, my legs trembling. "Arthur, I built the systems that run every single one of your hotels. I trained every manager. When your own nephew stole from you, I protected you." "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Mabel," Arthur said, just waving his hand dismissively. "It's just business. You had to know this day would come." "Did I?" I whispered. "Did I know that when you called me family? When you stood at my father's grave?" Kyle slid a document across the desk. "We're offering 2 weeks severance for every year of service. That's 40 weeks of pay. It's quite generous." I stared at the termination agreement. "Effective immediately. After 20 years, I wouldn't even get to say goodbye to my staff." My hands shook as I saw the non-compete clause, preventing me from working at any hotel within 50 miles for 2 years. "You're blocking me from working in the only industry I know," I said quietly. "That's standard procedure," Kyle replied, tapping his pen. "Sign here, and here." I looked at Arthur one last time. "You told me I was like a daughter to you." He just shrugged, a gesture so casual it felt like a punch. "I have a son. A real son. Business is business, Mabel." I signed the papers. What else could I do? 40 weeks' pay sounded like a lot of money, until I remembered Daniel's college tuition, Sarah's braces, and the mortgage that still had 15 years left on it. I walked out of that building with a check that might last us 6 months if we were careful, and a non-compete that made me unemployable. The security guard, a man I'd hired 3 years earlier, wouldn't even look me in the eye as I packed my desk. My entire 20-year career fit into one cardboard box. As I walked to my car, I glanced up and saw Kyle, already sitting in my old office, his feet on my desk, laughing on his phone, telling my Frank was the hardest part. He was in the kitchen when I got home at 11 in the morning, something I'd never done in 20 years. He took one look at my face and the box in my hands, and the coffee mug he was holding just slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. "He fired you?" he whispered, sinking onto a kitchen chair. "Arthur fired you?" I sat down at the kitchen table and told him everything. The meeting, Kyle's charts, the non-compete. Frank didn't say anything at first. He just stared at the wall, at a photo from Arthur's 60th birthday party, the one where Arthur had his arm around me, raising a glass. "We'll figure something out, Mabel," he finally said, but his voice sounded hollow. For the next 2 weeks, I tried. Every hotel job was forbidden by the non-compete. I applied for management roles in retail, in logistics, anywhere. The emails all said the same thing. "We've decided to pursue a candidate whose experience is a closer match." The translation was clear: they wanted someone younger. One recruiter was actually honest on the phone. "Look, Mabel," she said, "you're obviously qualified, but my client won't even look at a resume from someone over 50. They think they can't adapt to the corporate culture." Our savings were vanishing. Daniel called from college about an internship opportunity that needed a $3,000 deposit we just didn't have. Sarah needed money for her class trip. The car started making a terrible grinding noise. The hot water heater just quit. One morning, after another night of staring at the ceiling, I was rummaging through my mother's old papers in the attic, just looking for any old savings bonds or forgotten assets. She'd kept everything in an old trunk, all organized in her perfect handwriting. Tax returns from the 70s, my old report cards, every card we'd ever given her. That's when I saw it. A small, faded blue envelope. On it, in my mother's handwriting, it said, "Mabel, First County Bank, 1985. Inside was an old passbook. And suddenly, I remembered. Clear as day. I was 15, and I'd just gotten my first paycheck from babysitting, maybe $20. My grandmother, Josephine, my mother's mother, had driven me to the bank in her old rattling Buick that always smelled like peppermints. "Every woman needs her own money, Mabel," Grandma Josephine had said, her knobby fingers guiding mine on the deposit slip. "This is yours. You don't touch it unless you're in real trouble. Understand? Not for a car, not for a boy, only for a real emergency." I put that $20 in, and I swear I never thought about it again. Life went on. College, marriage, kids, Arthur's hotels. That account had just been sitting there, untouched, for over 40 years. Looking at our bills, I figured, maybe it had grown to a few $100s with interest. Even that would buy us groceries for a few weeks. First County Bank had been bought out by a regional bank in the 90s, and then a national bank in 2010. The original building was now a yoga studio. I walked into the new glass and steel branch feeling ridiculous, clutching this 40-year-old passbook like some kind of fossil. The teller, a young woman named Jessica with perfect nails, looked at it like it was an ancient relic. "Oh, wow," she said. "This is, seriously vintage. I've never seen one of these for real." "I know it's old," I said, feeling my face flush. "The account probably isn't even active." "Oh no, these old accounts are definitely valid," she said. "They just take special handling. Let me get my manager. She loves this kind of thing." The branch manager, a kind-looking woman in her 40s named Patricia Holstead, came over. She studied the passbook carefully. "Miss Harrison, this is fascinating. These old First County accounts are rare. Let me check this in our legacy system." She took me to her office, a quiet room away from the main floor. "Account number 0048711985. Let's see." She typed in the long account number, navigating an old-looking screen, all green text on a black background. And then she just stopped. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Is something wrong?" I asked, my stomach dropping. "Is the account empty? Is it closed?" No, Miss Harrison, she said slowly, looking from the screen to me and back again. The account is very much active. But there is something highly unusual here. Patricia stared at her screen, then took off her glasses and cleaned them, as if that would change the words. Miss Harrison, this account had an automatic investment program linked to it. That's extremely rare for a 1985 passbook account, especially one for a minor. An investment program? I leaned in. I only ever put in $20. No, ma'am. There were other deposits. $5. Every single month, from 1985 until 2010. The deposits came from Robert Harrison. And then, $10 a month, from 2010 to 2015. From Alice Harrison. My parents. My throat closed up. They never said a word. That's not even the unusual part, Patricia went on, her voice filled with wonder. These deposits weren't just sitting in savings earning interest. They were automatically transferred to a brokerage account, and they bought the same exact stock, every month, for 40 years. Miss Harrison, have you ever heard of Berkshire Hathaway? The office felt like it was tilting. Warren Buffett's company? The very one. Your parents were purchasing fractional shares of Berkshire Hathaway Class A stock. Every month. Since 1985. Do you have any idea what those shares were worth then, versus now? I gripped the chair. I know it was expensive. Maybe $2,000 back in the 80s? $2,050 a share in 1985, to be exact, Patricia said, typing again. Now, your $5 and $10 investments bought tiny fractions of shares. But they accumulated. Miss Harrison, one single share of Berkshire Hathaway Class A is currently trading at $543,000. That's not possible. It's absolutely possible. She hit the print button, and pages started streaming out. Your account bought fractional shares, every month, for 40 years. The compound growth, the accumulation. Mr. Buffett never split the stock. She gathered the papers and spread them on her desk. Ms. Harrison, your current account balance is $3,742,816.34. I just stared at the number on the paper. It didn't look real. There must be a mistake. My parents were working-class people. My father was a welder. My mother was a seamstress. They saved coupons. They mended their clothes. The Social Security numbers are a perfect match, Patricia said softly. These deposits were from your parents. But there's something else. There is a sealed envelope in our vault, attached to this account. The instructions say it's only to be opened by you, Mabel Harrison, when you access the funds. Would you like me to get it? I just nodded. I couldn't speak. She left and returned a minute later with a faded, yellowed envelope. My name, Mabel, was written on it in my mother's perfect cursive. Inside, there was a letter, dated June 15, 1985. And tucked behind it, a second note, added in 2010, in my father's unsteady hand. The first part, in my mother's handwriting, read, Dearest Mabel, if you are reading this, it means you've fallen on hard times. We know, because we set this account up with your grandmother's rule, only for when life truly knocks you down. Your father's cousin, Walter, works for a company in Omaha. He told us about this man, Mr. Warren Buffett, who thinks differently. Walter said, this Buffett fellow buys good companies and just holds on to them forever. He believes in patience, not flash. Your father and I don't understand all the stock market words, but we understand that good things grow slowly. Trees, children, and, it seems, money, if you plant it in the right place. Every $5 we put in here came from somewhere. One less pack of cigarettes for your dad, mending a coat instead of buying new. We did this because we know the world isn't always kind. We know that sometimes, good, hardworking people get tossed aside. If that ever happens to you, you remember that your value is not set by what someone else thinks of you. You have always been our greatest investment. Love, Mom. The second note, from 2010, in my father's writing, was shorter. Still putting money in every month, sweetheart. Turns out Buffett was right about patience. Your mother thinks we should tell you, but I say no. You're doing so well with that hotel fellow, you don't need this. But if you ever do need this, just remember that we always knew you were worth more than any boss could ever pay you. Love, Dad. 2010. Patricia handed me a tissue. I hadn't even realized I was crying, the tears dripping onto the printout. Miss Harrison, she said, her voice thick, your parents, they only bought Berkshire Hathaway. They never diversified, never sold one share. They bought through every crash, every boom. Just 40 years of $5 and $10 purchases. They lived so frugally, I whispered. They could have used this money for themselves. A new car. A vacation. Maybe, Patricia said gently, they just thought you were a better investment. I must have sat in my car in the bank's parking lot for an hour, just holding that letter, reading it again and again. My parents, my simple, hard-working parents who vacationed one town over, had been quietly building me a fortune, $5 and $10 at a time. The irony was almost too much. Arthur Vance, with his fancy cars and bespoke suits, had thrown me out because he thought my value had expired. And meanwhile, my parents, with their second-hand car and mended clothes, had made a 40-year bet on the simple idea that true value only compounds over time. When I finally got home and told Frank, he just sat down hard on the kitchen floor and cried. Not from sadness, but from a relief so profound it buckled his knees. Daniel drove home from college that night. Sarah kept asking, "Is this real, Mom? Is this actually real?" We sat around that dining room table until 3 a.m., reading my parents' letter out loud, over and over, laughing and crying all at once. But the money, you see, was only part of it. The real gift was finally understanding what my parents had known all along. Yes, they invested in Warren Buffett, but more than that, they understood his entire philosophy. That value investing isn't about getting rich quick or flashy gains. It's about seeing the real worth in something and having the patience to let it grow. 2 weeks later, I opened my own place. Not a hotel, goodness no. A small cafe. Nothing fancy, nothing like Arthur's places with their marble lobbies. I found a little storefront in our neighborhood, the kind of place that needed some love. I named it, the Alice and Robert, and I hung their picture right by the door. And the first person I hired was Martha, a wonderful chef. Arthur had fired her 6 months before me, told her 6'2" was too old to run a high-pressure kitchen. She cried when I offered her the job. Then I hired Hector, 58, who Arthur's son, Kyle, had let go because he wasn't a digital native. Then came Louise, 67, who'd been fired from another cafe for being too slow with the new point-of-sale computers. She knew every regular's name and their order within a week. We just opened our doors. No social media blitz, no influencer events. Just good coffee, homemade pastries, and people who were genuinely happy to be there. Martha's scones were like poetry. Hector kept the place running like a Swiss watch. Louise made every person who walked in feel like they were the most important customer of the day. The word spread the old-fashioned way. One neighbor telling another. Families came, then came back, then brought their friends. Within 3 months, we had a line out the door on weekends. Kyle Vance showed up about 6 months after we opened. He stood in the doorway of my bustling, noisy, happy cafe, looking smaller than I remembered. His digital revolution had been a disaster. I'd heard 3 of their 7 hotels had been sold off to cover the losses. The rest were struggling. My father, he said, having to speak up over the chatter, wants to know if you'd consider coming back. To run things. He's willing to discuss terms. I looked around my cafe. Martha was in the back, showing our new young baker, a 23-year-old, How to get the crust just right on the quiche. Hector was chatting with a customer while fixing a wobbly table leg. Louise was slipping a free cookie to a little girl who'd scraped her knee outside. You can tell Arthur thank you, I said, smiling at him. But I'm afraid I'm too old for his business. I'm exactly the right age for mine. Kyle left without ordering. I heard later that 2 more of the Vance hotels closed within the year. Arthur finally retired to Florida. His legacy was reduced to just the original motel, now run by a nephew. Meanwhile, the Alice and Robert is thriving. We're not an empire. We're not a chain. We're just one little cafe that does things the right way. My parents would have loved it. Not because it's successful, but because of the philosophy. We invest in people because of their age, not in spite of it. We value wisdom, and patience, and loyalty, the things that actually grow more valuable over time. That money? Most of it is still invested, still growing, still following my parents' 40-year-old plan. Because my parents taught me the most important lesson of all. Wealth isn't about what you can buy or what you can spend. It's about what you can build, what you can pass on, and what you can become. When someone believes you are worth the investment, sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't the money you didn't know you had. It's finding out that someone loved you so much, they planted a tree knowing full well they'd never live to sit in its shade. They believed, absolutely, that one day, when you needed it most, you would finally understand that your value was never, ever decided by someone else's opinion. It was always there, quietly growing, just waiting for the right moment to blossom.